Hi friends, Oster here talking with famous people. I wanted to do a breakdown of some of the argumentation, such that it is, in this little Ben Shapiro video that I watched where it says Ben Shapiro destroys Don Lemon on Confederate statues. First of all, that's a horribly misleading title. There's nothing of the sort that goes on in this video. This is what actually goes down in the video. I flowed the whole thing. To flow it is, in a debate round, you write down all the things that are made, all the claims that are made, argumentation that matters. Alright, so basically the first chunk of this video, Don Lemon frames it as a conversation about taking down Confederate statues that distracts from what ought to be the matter of consideration, which is a murder committed by white supremacists in the South. Now, I would agree, as a general matter of course, that obviously rights transgressions are vastly more important than stupid statute stuff. But, I can't fix this now. This is the sort of thing that happens when
I try to cover up your mess behind you.
my what?
Mess.
Oh.
This is fun.
Okay, so I agree it's a rights violation. I don't agree that it matters that it's a white supremacist. It doesn't matter if it's a white supremacist. If it's a murder, it's a murder. Okay, and we make a big mistake by thinking that somehow the significance of a murder is dependent on the group identity of the person who commits it or the person who's killed. It doesn't matter. Alright, so the next section there is homeboy Ben Shapiro saying that the alt-right has seized on the issue of the statues as a misdirection in order to get the left to take this bait, argue the point that the statues should be taken down, and that really what the alt-right wanted to do was get more adherence to white supremacy, and the left took this bait and thereby drove people towards white supremacy by being so overreaching in their statue taking down in this. Okay? But, okay, first of all, note that these claims that Ben Shapiro is making are motivational claims about groups that don't have motivations, although they often act as though they do. It's worth noting that, I guess, referring to the right, if you want to refer to Republicans, for example, or media that is highly supportive of, I guess, traditionally conservative politics, I mean, even then you're going to have trouble drawing lines around that, right? It's going to be only so uniform in its narratives. People are individuals and express their understanding of politics a little bit differently. So there's a bit of a reification issue here where he keeps referring to as the left and the alt-right and stuff like that as groups that take action and have stuff happen to them and stuff. Okay, anyway, now there's one really interesting kind of argument that's made here where he says 50% of the population supports leaving the statues where they are, and since that large of the percent of the population is in support of leaving the statues where they are, obviously leaving the statues where they are is not a racist policy. Well, I guess you could say the question would be, how strongly does support for the policy correlate with an overt racism, like membership in white supremacy groups or something, and then the correlation would be very weak. I bet, though, that the correlation between people supporting statues staying up and the percentage of people who self-identify as Caucasian is stronger. So that doesn't mean, however, the whole notion of being racist or not is stupid. Regardless, it's a complicated argument as to whether that actually warrants the conclusion he's drawn there. 50% of the population supports it, and 50% of the population would not qualify as racist under traditional definitions of the term. So then supporting for the statue must not be a racist thing. If you want to talk about policies as being inherently racist outside of the perceptions of the people who support the policies, that's possible to do, but it would be a second level of conflation with, a second level of abstraction it's not necessary, and it's a problem argument. But it's hard to answer exactly, as you can see. Trump says statue removal has no limiting principle, which is the winning argument in the in the issue. It has no limiting principle. We have statues of all kinds of people. Some of them may have been great people. Some of them may have been rapists, but they founded the city or something. Some of them may have been pirates or something. I don't know. Lots of people do bad shit. And, not everybody in the Confederacy was a bad person. And just because you fought for the Confederacy and doing so inherently upheld a status quo that justified violence against certain individual people based on imposed identity designations of make-believe race, doesn't mean that we should worry about whether these statues go for them. Alright, so again, he says here, first of all, I'd say about the Trump says no limiting principle. It is a winning argument. In other words, why this statue, not that statue? Why that guy over there killed 3 children one time back when he was governor, when he ran over them with his carriage in 1872. Let's take a statue down. But that's very selective framing by Trump, because Trump operates by no limiting principle. If he did operate by limiting principle, he'd apply that principle across the board, which he clearly doesn't. That's not a Ben Shapiro critique, that's a Trump critique. Ben Shapiro says, the left drives peeps to Trump with their ideology or whatever. But I guess it's true that people being incredibly wrong repel those from them. I'm not sure that drives them towards any direction, though, necessarily towards Trump. It would be nice if there were more nuanced critiques of individual arguments and individuals making arguments, and less conference of arguments onto group labels like this, because I think that's counterproductive. It contributes to the problem that he's pointing out is happening from the other side that he doesn't like. This one here says, depends, but, media action exacerbates. He's saying media action exacerbates any problem that you might have with Trump because it drives people to him by being too shrill in its outrage. But, I just simply disagree with that. I think that all media action about the subject in general moves us closer to an outcome. The discourse will take care of itself. To the extent that there's a problem discursively, it's not somebody else's discourse. It's the fact that discursive critiques like this aren't the norm. Okay, let's turn the page now. I don't need to do anything on the computer to turn the page. Media agenda again. Patina of objectivity. Don Lemon correctly calls him on that. Well, everyone's got a perspective. But the thing is, there is a legitimacy to objectivity when you are metaing up. In other words, I'm not taking any position on the statues. I'm not taking any position on Trump. I'm not taking any position on anything. I'm talking about whether or not these arguments are doing anything or what they're doing. And not a whole lot of argumentation of any sort was made here. I thought this was going to be a good one to critique because of the title. It shows you that the person who titled this either knows nothing about argumentation or a lot about YouTube, or both. Ben Shapiro points out that the Trump base thinks that any disagreement with Trump is, he uses the expression animus towards Trump, which made me want to Google if it's animus towards or animus against. I still want to Google that. I probably should. Animus towards or against. Animus towards, animus against. If a person has animus against somebody, let me see. When a person has animus against someone, they have a strong feeling of dislike for them, even when there is no good reason for it. Animus against? Kitty, will you stop? See, I thought it was animus against when I heard it. I was like, is that right? Animus towards? But I don't think, we probably use it either way. animus against. You lost your animus. That sounds kind of pornographic. Okay, so it looks like it's animus against. I think I was right. Grammar Nazi wins. Okay. There's one thing I do know. It's diction and grammar. If I knew diction and grammar, I wouldn't have called that a grammar issue, would I? No, I would have called it a diction issue. Because prepositions are idiomatic. Okay, so... And he says... Don Lemon makes the actual arguments in the whole thing. He says, what does that say? I don't know. Should we take the statues down, the Confederate statues? Don Lemon makes the analogy of Hitler, saying, well, would you like to go to Hitler High School if you're a Jew? I mean, I get the analogy, but it's not really apt because, obviously, Confederate statues relate to American history, wherein the high schools and stuff are. Whereas a Hitler statue or a Hitler high school would be strange celebration of a former enemy's dictator. I'm not a Jew. It doesn't require me to be a Jew to not want to go to Adolf Hitler High School. And also, I think we probably would all kind of like it if we did. We'd be like, okay, you know what? Fuck it. Yeah, let's go to Adolf Hitler High School. Why not? People are gonna think you're racist. I didn't pick which high school we're going to. I just, it's a, guys, hello, it's named after a different Adolf Hitler. It's not that one, not the famous one. Anyway, so it's not really analogous. A better analogy would be something like, if they put up a statue of like, here's a real, like Joe, what was that, Sheriff Joe Shapiro from Arizona, or whatever his name is. That guy, if they put up a statue of him here in Laverne, I would advocate they take it down, but I wouldn't feel oppressed by it, even though I absolutely identify much more with the people that he jails than I do with him. So it's not really an apt analogy. An apt analogy like one I gave still wouldn't result in me thinking we should take the statues down. I don't really think you should take them down. Alright. It's a waste of time. Waste of energy. Trump's people and animus towards ignorance. Then Don Lemon says he has an animus towards ignorance. He doesn't have an animus towards Trump. Animus towards ignorance. What does that mean? It makes no sense because look, what is the definition of this? It says, a person has an animus against someone, they have a strong feeling of dislike for them, even when there's no good reason for it. So, if you have an animus against ignorance, that means you have a reasonless dislike of reasonlessness. Why would you have a reasonless dislike of reasonlessness? You're wasting syllables. Okay, thanks for watching Talking with Famous People. Don't forget to eat plenty of cheese. I guess I'm going to put this up. I think the key point here is there's no debate on the subject at all, frankly. If you want to debate the subject, the only argument that was laid out on the flow, really, is the limiting principle argument and Don Lemon's appeal to emotion. And so, what are you going to vote for? You're going to vote for the limiting principle argument, even though it's poorly applied by Trump, who doesn't practice what he preaches. It's actually the winning argument because there's, like I said, but they don't make any of these arguments here. So it's like this is what passes for actual discussion of an issue in terms of why we ought or ought not do something, is a discussion about the motivations of the left and how they're acting out against Trump and saying outrageous things like Trump's morally bereft, which he is, and that he's mentally ill, which he's not. I mean, he's not mentally ill. He is morally bereft. That's the reality of it. He's an ESTP unconstrained. He needs an INFJ. Anyway, but the point is, that's not none of that shit that was talked about was relevant to the issue, really, except for a little bit here and there. Most of it was about make-believe shit, about the left doing this and the alt-right doing this and the media doing this, and really it's a bunch of individual people who do kind of cluster, sometimes cluster a lot, but do not share an agenda, do not sit down around a table and say, what's our plan, guys? It just is make-believe what they're talking about. So that's what I would say about that.